tell, do you see the road? I'm out to my soul into the sides whenever the smoke clear out of my face and my picture perfect.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of, What If Harry Potter Meets Record of Ragnarok? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Asian Lion Heart 310 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. How about we discuss with the other Valkyries and ask their opinions? Gull proposed softly and her sister glanced at her for a moment, thoughtful, before nodding her head in agreement. Indeed we should. The two went toward an empty room and there, Brunhild summoned the rest of the Valkyries who all greeted their two sisters warmly. Once the greetings were done, Brunhild and Gull explained to them what happened, aka the arrival of death itself, the revelation of a champion of death, the story of the Deathly Hallows etc. and needless to say it was a shock for many of those girls. What can you tell us of the man himself, sister? One of the Valkyries asked Brunhild with curiosity and interest. It was a slender young woman, wearing an angelic outfit, consisting of a long blue dress with some white details, with something looking like feathers on the back, and a sort of pink bow tie. She has very bright pink eyes, and has hair that is a faded white and pink color that is tied in a large bun. She was wearing what appears to be two large circular earrings and an accessory consisting of 4 white feathers that point upwards, starting from her ears. She is Hagrid, the 12th Valkyrie. From what I've seen and heard, he's adept at magic and an excellent swordsman. Brunhild began to say only to be interrupted. A swordsman? Amazing, said another Valkyrie with a bright smile. The one who said those words was a young woman with long purple hair braided down her back with a dark bluish-green ribbon hair tie with a golden crisscross pattern and has brown eyes. She had 2 shoulder-length bangs and a slightly longer bang parted on either side, and the left side of her bangs is tied into a short braid that is only covered by her slightly longer bangs. She was wearing a white dark blue cheapao with gold stripes and short sleeves that exposed her chest, dark blue leggings with gold armbands below the knees of her encrypted legs, and flat shoes dark blue. Behind her back was a blue ribbon that tied her cheapao dress, which hung long with feathers hanging from the ribbon. On her left hand was a gold bracelet, while on her conditioned hand she wore a long dark blue fingerless glove with gold stripes but connected to her middle finger with a ring. It was Skalmold, the 6th Valkyrie, and, as you might have understood, she had a thing for swordsmen and swordsmanship. Brunhild shot her a glare and the girl mumbled an apology, looking embarrassed under the amused eyes of the rest of the Valkyries. Brunhild cleared her throat before speaking again. As I was saying, he is clearly adept in magic and a possible excellent swordsman, and his familiar is rather peculiar in itself. His familiar? You mean, the wolf, right? The one who can, in your words, change size, another Valkyrie asked with surprise and interest, blinking her eyes. It was a young woman with neck-length black hair styled in a bob haircut and turquoise-colored eyes. She looks like a medieval scholar that comes with a cape behind her back, a medieval scholar-like hat, and who was wearing rectangular glasses. It was Regenleaf, the 7th Valkyrie. Indeed, I do, Brunhild answered with a nod of her head. The man himself sounds fascinating and the wolf even more. I wonder if I could do some tests on them both, commented another Valkyrie who so far had been silent, a contemplative look on her face. The voice belonged to a serene-looking appealing woman with light, blonde and long hair tied up into 2 loose ponytails, one in each side in front of her. Her eyes were closed so we couldn't see what color they were. Anyway, she is wearing a stiff hat with petal-shaped figures decorating the outside part, a flowy shoulderless dress with detached sleeves that opens at the side, revealing part of her legs and feathers inside, small shoes, and a floating long piece of cloth with ends that look strangely like wings. Her name was Gondel and she is the 9th Valkyrie and she is the scientist of them all, thanks to her love of science. Her sisters all looked at her blankly, none of them saying anything as their expressions literally screamed what they were thinking, but the woman, despite having her eyes closed, merely smiled in an innocent manner. Anyway, as I was saying, this man is very adept in his use of magic. He was able to create a life form with nothing but a little BLD and, according to Death, he was able to defeat a great many creatures before he even reached adulthood. This makes the champion of Death a man of great power who could become our greatest ally or one of our worst enemies, Brunhild explained after regaining her composure, her expression showing nothing but seriousness. The other Valkyries glanced at one another before nodding in agreement. For that, we must make sure to gain his loyalty, the first Valkyrie began to say before being interrupted again by one of her sisters. And how do you intend to do that exactly? The Valkyrie in question has the appearance of a girl with a youthful face and large reddish eyes, slightly protruding incisors and thin eyebrows and eyelashes. She has neck-length blonde hair and her bangs are fashioned into a fringe but devolve into a wild mass of blades of hair. Her head is adorned with a kokoshnik with a triangular pattern and was wearing a stylized black and white low-cut dress with a crimson pendant at the base of her neck and with short separated sleeves and collar. Her navel is exposed in a diamond cut and her skirt is exceedingly frilly. In addition, the girl was wearing black leather gloves on her hands and, on her feet, she has crimson shoes with high heels. She is known as Hlok, and she is the 11th Valkyrie and currently, her arms were crossed as a skeptical expression adorned her young face. Easy apparently, the man is single and from what I know, some of you are still single yourselves, Brunhild said in a blunt manner, glancing back and forth between her different sisters. A long silence followed those words as all the Valkyries, minus Gal who already knew about Brunhild's plan and Brunhild herself, stared wide-eyed at the eldest of them with looks of pure shock and surprise. Clearly, they were taken aback by Brunhild's suggestion. But the silence was short-lived as a few seconds later, one of the young-looking Valkyries literally exploded. You got to be kidding me. You want to force one of us to date someone we don't even know? The one who kindly spoke like that to Brunhild looked exactly like Hlok but with remarkable differences. Unlike Hlok's, the girl's light red hair is bun curly shape braided, instead of wild mass blades. The dress and headband she was wearing are also the same as Hlok, except for her footwear, as her right leg has a long dark blue stocking while the left leg sports a short stocking. Her name is Alvitra and she is the 10th Valkyrie and a real Spitfire. You might be our oldest sister but you have no rights to do such thing to you dash, the girl ranted before. Freezing as a new sound echoed in the room. In fact, she wasn't the only one to freeze at that unexpected sound, her 12 other sisters also froze, as if petrified. What was that sound? It was a growl, an animal growl. As one, the 13 Valkyries turned their heads and their eyes widened when they saw an enormous black wolf with green eyes at least the size of a horse. Standing a few feet away from them, at the entrance to the room they were in, staring at them all. Brunhild and Gal recognized the wolf at once, and their faces turned paler, that deep black fur, its glittering white fangs, its green eyes shining with intelligence. Only one wolf they knew matched that description. It's, the youngest stammered in surprise and fear, her eyes fixed on the wolf's menacing form. Fenris, Brunhild replied in a tone filled with surprise, her eyes fixed on the black wolf, unable to look away. The other Valkyries, upon hearing the name wolf, froze, but their eyes shone with curiosity and interest. Suddenly, the short silence was broken by Hlok who snorted loudly before hissing disdainfully. That's Fenris. This mud is a little big, all right, but it doesn't look very special. Big mistake. At this, a furious growl escaped the black wolf's throat, and it began to swell and grow larger to the point of reaching the same size that Brunhild and Gal had observed a little earlier through the projection. Hlok froze in surprise and fear, and the other Valkyries did the same, completely taken aback by this unexpected transformation. The wolf's fangs were exposed and saliva dripped from its jaws while its green eyes seemed to flash as the beast watched the Valkyries. A tense silence fell as both parties stared at each other, their muscles tense. The Valkyries, despite their fears of the imposing black wolf, were ready to defend themselves if necessary, while Fenris, too, was ready to defend herself in case the latter attacked her. Suddenly, one of the Valkyries slowly approached the wolf, causing the latter to stop growling and observe her calmly but warily. The Valkyrie in question is an appealing woman with long and wide light brown hair that reaches her waist with a double-ended golden spear hairpin on the back of her head while chin-length bangs split on either side and lime green eyes. She was wearing a classical white and black dress adorned with golden plates on both sides of her waist, a turquoise pendant with a dark blue neckscarf attached to it and black and white high boots on high heels with metal shin guards. She is none other than Randgriz, the fourth Valkyrie. "Hello Fenris, what a magnificent creature you are," the Valkyrie murmured softly as she slowly approached the black wolf. Fenris tilted her head to the side, like a curious puppy, her green gaze showing curiosity despite her wariness while her tail twitched gently, a sign that she appreciated the compliment. Furthermore, the wolf didn't move as the Valkyrie approached her, which was a good sign. The other Valkyries watched in silence as their sister calmly approached the immense canine until they were a meter or two away from the latter. Fenris didn't move and simply looked at Randgriz with her green eyes. With a smile, the latter stretched her right arm forward, her hand almost touching the wolf's muzzle, but the latter flinched away. The other Valkyries froze, thinking the wolf was going to attack their sister, but it didn't. Randgriz remained calm and smiling, looking at the wolf calmly. Fenris relaxed and lowered his head, allowing the Valkyrie to touch her. The latter smiled tenderly and rested her hand on the wolf's muzzle before stroking its surface. A small whimper escaped the wolf's throat and her tail wagged more energetically. "There, calm down, everything will be fine," Randgriz murmured in a soft voice. The wolf let out another small whimper, then pressed her muzzle against the Valkyrie, which made the latter giggle. "It seems Hlok was wrong, you're special," Randgriz commented with a small smile, and the wolf gave her a look as if to say, "Of course I am." Reassured, the other Valkyries approached, but barely had they taken a few steps towards the wolf and their sister when Fenris growled at them, his fangs exposed. Brunhild, Gaul, and the others froze, their eyes fixed on Fenris's menacing form, unable to move. "Shoo, it's okay, they won't hurt you," Randgriz whispered to the wolf before looking at her sisters. "Hlok, you should apologize," she said to the 11th Valkyrie in a soft but firm voice. The latter wanted to protest, but faced with the looks her sisters were giving her at that moment, she changed her mind and, after taking a deep breath, she approached the wolf before saying, "I'm sorry I insulted you." Fenris looked at her for a moment but nodded in acceptance. Seeing this, Hlok calmed down a little, then Randgriz signaled her to come closer, which she did. Soon, the young Valkyrie was standing by her sister's side and, after a glance at the latter, reached out to touch the wolf's muzzle. The latter let her do so, but her green eyes watched her cautiously, ready to act in case of a possible attack. But nothing of the sort happened. Hlok was able to place her hand on Fenris's muzzle without difficulty, and as with her sister, the latter's tail began to wiggle gently. "See? Everything's fine," Randgriz whispered gently to the wolf with a smile, and the canine looked at her for a moment with eyes shining in agreement. One by one, the other Valkyries approached, and soon, all of them were stroking the dark fur of the immense black wolf. The latter was very relaxed now, and you could see it in her wagging tail, her lolling tongue, and the glint in her green eyes. "She is a very appealing creature indeed," Gondal commented with a smile, stroking the wolf's fur with his left hand. "And more approachable than I thought," Gaul added, looking at Fenris, his right hand stroking the latter's muzzle, earning herself a big lick in response. "EW, the 13th Valkyrie groaned in disgust at the saliva covering her body before shooting a pouting glare at the wolf when the latter growled in amusement while the other Valkyries snickered or watched on with equal amusement. Brunhild, for her part, remained slightly withdrawn, thoughtful. She was also surprised by the wolf's friendly nature, but it was a pleasant surprise. Inwardly, seeing her sisters having a good time with the wolf warmed her heart, but suddenly, a more frightening thought crossed her mind. "Wait a minute, if Fenris is here, then that means," she began to whisper in fear and dread, her eyes widening slightly. "That the subject of your conversation is not far off." "Yes," an amused male voice was heard in the room, answering Brunhild's internal fear. At this unexpected voice, all the Valkyries froze, their eyes widened, then, in a single movement, they turned their heads towards the place where the voice was coming from. And that's when they saw them. In a corner of the room, where there was only darkness, two emerald green orbs shone. Except they weren't just any orbs. They were eyes. Brunhild and Gull stiffened at the sight of them as they knew who they belonged to, and they were proven right as their owner stepped out of the shadows with a grin on his face. Like they feared, it was none other than the Champion of Death himself, Harry James Potter Black. The other Valkyries found themselves frozen in place, unable to move, and their attention locked on the newcomer. He was a very handsome man, one of the most attractive they had ever seen, in fact. His thin face almost gave him an effeminate air, were it not for the circular black beard that surrounded his mouth, while the rest of his face was clean-shaven. On his face, the handsome stranger sported two scars, one of which seemed almost invisible to sight. The first scar was on his forehead, but only those with good eyesight would notice it. For those who could see it, this scar strangely resembled a lightning bolt drawn perfectly into the flesh. The second, more conspicuous scar was on the left side of his face. It was a large scar that crossed his eye from top to bottom. Unlike the other, this scar had a pinkish tinge, making it much more visible to others. Atop his head, as if caressed by an invisible breeze, rose a mass of long, messy black hair that reached his shoulders. The hair looked well-groomed, despite the mess. But the most noticeable feature on the man's face was his eyes. They were the color of the purest emerald and seemed to glow with supernatural energy. It was like looking at two green flames, bright and alive. The Valkyries, minus Brunhild and Gull, who had already seen him, thought they could drown or melt at the sight of the man and his gorgeous eyes, and some of them could be seen blushing madly. Even worse, their blush deepened when the man smiled wider. "Why you? What are you doing here?" Brunhild stammered, surprised to see the man she'd been talking to, her sister, standing in front of her, arms crossed and an amused expression on his handsome face. "Well, my dear friend Death has matters to attend, so I had nothing better to do than looking around. Furthermore, a certain she-wolf I love let me know that I'm being talked about," the man replied nonchalantly with a shrug. At this, Brunhild turned her head to look at Fenris, who looked perfectly smug at the moment, looking at the Valkyrie with satisfaction. Then, slowly, Harry looked away from Brunhild to rest his emerald-green eyes on Fenris and the other Valkyries. "I must admit that I am greatly surprised. Fenris is not the type to get attached easily to strangers," he commented with a slight smile and a tender look towards the wolf before looking back at the Valkyries to add, "You must be very special." A reddish tint appeared on the faces of some Valkyries, and some of them looked away, as if embarrassed by his words, which amused our hero, who released a small amused laugh. Then, Harry looked again at Brunhild. "But let's get back to serious topics," he began to say calmly before adding, in a firmer voice. "You do know it's not very polite to talk about someone behind their back, right? Let alone plan unions with the sole aim of controlling that person." As he spoke, a change had taken place within him. His body seemed covered in a cloak of shadow, a dark veil lightly masked his face, the cloak he wore seemed swept by an invisible breeze, and his green eyes, once full of amusement, now shone with a disconcerting coldness. The Valkyries, from the youngest to the oldest, shuddered in fear under his icy gaze, his green eyes shining with suppressed anger and a coldness that rivaled the climate of the far north. Only Fenris seemed impassive before this display of force. But no one was more frightened than Brunhild herself. The first of the Valkyries was frozen like a statue, her eyes fixed on the Champion of Death in terror. Besides the icy stare the latter gave her, his aura was just as terrifying. She was very powerful and so threatening that she reminded him of divine beings. Her thoughts were broken when the man began to speak in a calm voice despite his anger. "Once, people tried to manipulate me into serving as a weapon against a dangerous Dark Lord. They wanted to make me a small puppet who would obey the orders they gave him without complaint. They almost succeeded, but fortunately, I was able to escape their corrupted clutches, and since then, I swore to myself that I would never be manipulated like that again." The Champion of Death paused, scanning each of the Valkyries to make them understand his words before returning his emerald gaze to Brunhild. who was trembling like a leaf. "You have 10 seconds to explain why you wanted my loyalty, or I swear on death itself that I will kill you," Harry ordered in an icy voice as his eyes flashed. Brunhild, still gripped by terror, answered honestly, repeating the same words she had used with Gaul earlier. Harry listened to her in silence, her face impassive and her emerald green eyes showing no reaction or feeling. A few moments later, Brunhild had finished her explanation and a silence fell as our hero reflected on the Valkyrie's words. Harry could only admire Brunhild's devotion to preserving humans even though she knew how cruel and selfish they could be. The latter felt so close to humanity that she was ready to invoke Ragnarok to save them, thus defying the gods themselves. A dangerous act but worthy of respect. Besides, she wanted one of her sisters to know love, which was not a bad thing in itself. But forced love? Now that's another story. However, Harry sensed there was another reason for Brunhild to want to defy the gods. Looking into Brunhild's eyes, he decided to do something he hadn't done in a long time. "Legilimens," he said silently, and instantly, he saw why the first of the Valkyries hated the gods. The gods imprisoned the man she loved, Siegfried, a handsome young man with a muscular but lean physique, having a long flowing mane of hair and a body covered in scars. Loki, god of mischief of the Norse pantheon, had framed the man and he was sent to Tartarus by Odin. Harry felt sorry for Brunhild and stopped his spell while taking note of what he saw. "I see. While I disapprove of your manipulative attempt to gain my loyalty, I can understand your reasons. I cannot blame you," our hero finally said after a few seconds of silence. A sigh of relief escaped Brunhild's mouth and her shoulders relaxed. Then, she looked back at Harry when our hero spoke again. "You should know that I am not, or rather no longer, a big fan of human beings, but I don't wish for their extermination either. Life would be mad at me if I let that happen." A small, amused laugh escaped Harry at his last words. Then, his green eyes rested on Gaul when the latter spoke, her voice shy and soft. "Does this mean that you will help us preserve humanity, Lord Potter Black?" "Please, call me Harry Potter. Black makes me feel old," our hero commented with a shudder of horror before adding in a softer voice. "And yes, from this day on, you can count on my support provided I have the right to punish humanity if he starts to become too dangerous for this world." "That's acceptable," one of the Valkyries murmured with a nod of agreement, soon followed by the rest of the group. The one who spoke was a tall, busty young woman, and an appealing one at that, with long dark purple and straight hair with bangs covering her right eye. Her bangs are covering her left eye whenever she gets angry, and a long braid going from the left side of her head to her waist. Like Harry, her eyes were emerald green but not as luminescent as him. Also, she is wearing a white cap on her head and a white opened-up military jacket with a dark purple strapless corset exposing her melons along with white jeans underneath. She was also wearing white high boots with metal knee guards and black fingerless gloves with detached cufflinks. Her name is Hrist and she is the second of the Valkyries. After that, it was a pleasant moment, lying against the thick, silky fur of the enormous but endearing Fenris. The Valkyries asked Harry questions, who not only answered them as well as he could, but also asked them questions in return, which was a pleasure to see. Brunhild was the only one who stayed back, while observing her sister's interaction with the champion of death. She was surprised to see such a powerful being be so friendly with them, but she would be lying if she said she disliked it. Moreover, she was very happy because now, she and her sisters had earned the help of this man despite a rather complicated start. But the result was the same, the champion of death was their ally. And judging by the sparkling looks of some of her sisters, most notably Rangriz, Hrist, Radgride, Skalmold and Gyrolo, Harrison James Potter Black, or Harry, will soon be part of the family. She was curious to know what the future would hold for her now with the champion of death by their side. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for more crossovers. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Asian Lionheart 310 on fanfiction.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.